Hello, New Zealand. I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk. This is our 21st episode, and we've got an action-packed lineup. It's only 54 days to go before we're at the booth to figure out who we're going to vote for. So let's welcome the panel in. You can't vote for them, but they're going to give you their opinion anyway. Firstly, Bruce, you're still on Waiheke Island. Evening.
Still here. In the wind and the rain.
Wind and the horizontal rain today. Sue, still in Masterton?
Back in Masterton, yes. Yep. Fire's lit, and it's it's been cold today.
Okay, and Alla, I'm having a chocolate for each day leading up to the birth. How many more chocolate days have I got?
4 weeks away. My brain is not.
28 chocolates. Awesome. Dr. Michael Reid in Christchurch, how are you?
G'day, Bob. Good, thanks. Yeah, we've had a bit of strong wind here today, but it's the sun's also been out, so nice day.
Okay, and finally, Christine, welcome back. It's lovely to see your smiling face again. You really got that lurgy bad, didn't you?
Oh, that COVID really got me this time. Yep, it was terrible. Okay. But I no longer have brain fog, although you may doubt that by the end of the hour. We'll see.
Okay, team, image of the week. KPMG are advertising for a business development manager in the government sector. And here's the application form on LinkedIn with the preferred pronouns that they want you to use. Now, let me give you a close-up so you can really appreciate them. If you're applying for this job, team, you've got the options of he, him, she, her, they, them, ze, them, ze, her, am, her, fey, fair, and hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo, that must be a bug in the system, I think. Ka-ching. And then also there is use name only, so that's no pronouns for non-humans maybe. And just in case one of your 112 genders aren't included, they have a box with custom, which says let the employer know what pronouns you use so that they can address you correctly. So team, if you want to apply for a government job, there we are. You better start learning your pronouns. And video of the week. I think you guys all watched that spelling bee program. Actually, Michael, were you actually on one of those spelling bee things? You know, you get given a word and you ask the meaning and the source before you spell it?
Oh, yeah, of course, Bob. Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think this might be you at a younger age. Have a watch of this clip.
Your word is woman.
Well, woman. Can I have the country of origin, please?
I don't, probably England or Germany or something. Woman.
Can I have the definition, please?
Why don't you ask Judge 1 that question?
Can I have the definition of woman, please?
No.
Why not? I'm allowed to ask for definitions, right?
The thing is, a woman is a woman is
So
women.
What she's trying to say is that each person gets to define for themselves what a woman is.
So can you define it?
No.
Why? I just want to know the definition of woman.
And that makes you a hateful little bigot, Lincoln.
I don't hate anybody.
Okay, so there we go. Somebody sent that to me and I thought it was actually very, very funny. Anyway, we need to keep moving. Free speech moment, and we've got a couple of you who are wanting to get something off your chest. Sue, we're actually going to start with you because you want to talk about surrogacy. So your free speech moment starts now.
Yes, so I purchased a magazine over the weekend, and it's not something I do regularly, but I was intrigued to read about Toni Street and her road through surrogacy. And it was titled The Truth of Surrogacy. Whilst her reasons for seeking surrogacy hold weight and are very emotive, and she did briefly disclose the hormone treatments, physical and emotional hardship of it all, I'm not sure she can claim the truth of surrogacy as an industry. Toni, along with an MP, Timothy Coffey, have been the face to push the surrogacy laws through to make it easier in New Zealand and more accessible. And there is just enough social presence for them to be the poster kids of surrogacy. But there is a darker side to surrogacy industry that does not see the light of day here in New Zealand. There are very good reasons why surrogacy laws are tight and even sit outside the law in countries such as France, Italy, Hungary, Germany, and even Sweden, the liberal capital, I'm sure, to name a few. And these countries have different parts of law that address surrogacy concerns. France and Italy have a ban, but Italy have strengthened their law in July to criminalise people who seek surrogacy outside of Italy. So Germany has embryo protection laws. The Netherlands have laws against promotion of commercial surrogacy. And Sweden's law does not allow assisted conception for the purposes of surrogacy. So as I mentioned in last week's Free Speech Moment, Jennifer Lahl, L-A-H-L, from Centre for Bioethics and Culture Network is the best person to enlighten you. It may surprise you just where the tentacles stretch to include death and poor outcomes. So my point is this, that we can use an emotive case to establish change in law. The laws are made, and yet we fail to consider what these laws will look like in 10 or 20 years' time, with the original intent often lost. And we have many examples of our law in our current book of laws, examples of these. And under MMP, we suffer rushed lawmaking, and we end up with a dog's breakfast that seldom serves us well. Thanks, Bob.
Well said. Thank you, Sue. And actually, we have a website on that, surrogacylaws.nz. Very simple to find, surrogacylaws.nz. Right, Bruce, you're next. And actually, you want to review a book that I kindly gave you by Christopher Rufo. So your book review starts now.
Well, I've read several excellent books on the deliberate undermining of Western culture, civilization, I should say, from Nietzsche to current sexual identity politics. Rufo's America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything, is one of the most readable and detailed I've read. He exposes the cultural poison of critical race theory that activists have imported into New Zealand. Replete with a revealing examination of events, Rufo explores the intellectual and spiritual hollowness of anti-racism, queer theory, and decolonization dogma. He describes how left-wing intellectuals and militants methodically have captured American institutions, subverting them from the inside out. He begins this book with the grandfather of critical race theory, Herbert Marcuse, the Marxist refugee from Nazi Germany. He points out how the architects of diversity and inclusion replaced equality and equity, subverting individual rights in favour of group identity. That should be familiar to us in New Zealand. Rufo explains how Marcuse praised the hippies and the counterculture movement for initiating a sexual, moral and political rebellion. Echoing Nietzsche's transvaluation of all values, Marcuse argued that the revised Marxist revolution must begin with a new sensibility, type of man with a biological drive towards liberalism. Now, this is the point, the critical point. The new proletariat would use race rather than class to prepare the grounds for revolution. By creating a system of effective collective ownership over economic production, and by bringing about through a qualitative change in human rights in accordance with the new sensitivity and the new consciousness which we're in the business of developing. Also, in that context, explains the BLM riots of 2021, the submission of many of the universities of critical race theory and its analysis of institutional racism, white supremacy, and the evils of colonialism. The law is really a mask for white male power. So the scene was set. And this is what we hear. Schools must be instructed to disrupt Western nuclear family dynamics. Structural racism and white supremacy challenge cisgender privilege. Break the tight grip of heteronormative thinking and abolish sexism, misogyny, and male-centeredness. Rufo also spends some time telling us about the Brazilian Marxist educator Paulo Freire, who became such an influential figure in educational theory across the Western world, and here in New Zealand too. Rufo is emphatic. Critical race theory was never designed to reveal truth. It was designed to achieve power. The real history of the theory is not a story of its intellectual discoveries, but its blitz, through the institutions of learning, media, and government. He says a number of things quite well. The critical race theorists have substituted verbalism for meaning and symbolism for substance. Great to unpack, but we don't have time. They crusaded for diversity, but treated racial groups as monoliths. Critical race theory embeds stereotypes, and personal offence becomes objective reality. However, Rufo doesn't leave us in despair. He anticipates the counter-revolution. I'll just call on one particular point. It's about what we say in public, debate and private conversation. We must confront the language of left-wing radicalism, which is the intimidating lingua franca of the educated class. So the counter-revolutionaries must take back control of language by rejecting the superficial bureaucratic jargon of the radical left and restore language that is not reactionary, but which reflects and reinforces eternal truths. Now, what did I get out of all this? Well, in one sentence, the politics of identity is an anti-history, irrational, unscientific, godless bully, and we mustn't allow it to intimidate us.
Okay, well done. Thank you, Bruce. And Rick says, I've just downloaded the ebook, so there we go. Now, let's go to Michael. And, Bruce has just highlighted an unscientific theory. You want to talk about science? Your free speech moment starts now.
Thanks, Bob. I want to talk about the place of science in current issues. Science, as many of us will know, is an approach and a method, an inquiry based on previous knowledge, which forms a hypothesis and then collects evidence based on clearly determined parameters. And in a pure sense, science can be objective and impartial, not entirely, but largely. Now, in recent times, I've seen the authority of the scientific enterprise become subject and captive to prevailing cultural ideologies. So if we think of a Venn diagram with three circles, economics is one circle, science is another, and ideology is another. And in the middle, where all those circles intersect, is government perspectives. Now, the first example I want to talk about is the COVID pandemic. Now, back when it was all happening, and we're in the thick of it, we heard daily from Michael Baker and Ashley Bloomfield, who were held up as scientific authorities. Susie Wiles was also in the background on occasion. And strategically, right in the middle, was Jacinda Ardern. And she said at one point, Bob, something that has really stuck with me. She said, "We own the science." Now, I'll come back to that in a moment, but we also had Grant Robertson telling us what economic measures would be put in place in response to the latest information. So we had statistics, we had graphs, we had modelling data, and we can see here these three circles in the Venn diagram, economics, science, and ideology, all interacting. Now, those three circles are really a scrambled eggs situation because you can't unscramble them. Now, Jacinda's statement has really lingered with me and got me thinking. You know, Bob, no one owns the science. Nobody owns the science. And there's incredible hubris in what she said there. She might have been very frustrated, of course, but it was a very unwise comment. Because by its nature, science is always contested and there are counterpoints, but no one owns it. Science is also never a unified monolith. There are different scientific perspectives, but we don't hear those. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the climate change debate. We see a similar fusion of politics, this time driven primarily by the United Nations. The economics and science flow from that. But again, science is held up to be authoritative. We have reports, we have modelling, we have new research, which in turn has huge practical and economic knock-on effects for different jurisdictions around the world. We've had recently outlandish claims about global boiling, but they've never had a counterpoint or a less alarmist scientific point of view, because that's not good politics. But there are people out there. There's for example, a Swedish scientist called Born Lomborg, and he wrote some years ago a volume called The Skeptical Environmentalist. Now, he had impeccable scientific credentials, but he was dismissed. The UN's views on science are what we told are authoritative and therefore correct. Now, the third example, Bob, and I'll finish with this, where science comes into play is the gender and sexuality issue. But interestingly and differently, here's where science, notably biology and genetics, get jettisoned in favour of feelings and identity politics and social activism. So what I'm saying, in the climate debate and in the COVID pandemic, science was held up there as authoritative, but it is readily dismissed when it comes to these sexuality debates. The prevailing narrative goes that we are to ignore the science and common sense and all history. And so I just think that's just interesting how science is used. In the three examples of current issues, I want to suggest that science is appropriated only when it serves prevailing political and cultural narratives. So my question is, to finish, can we ever now trust the scientific enterprise when it is so clearly captive to reforming ideologies? Or expressed another way, a more concise question is, whose science can we trust?
Okay, thank you, Michael. Right, let's go straight on to our topics. Team, I'm going to go through three quick issues and I want to come round and get your very brief opinion on where you stand on them and your interpretation. I do want to start with the latest news on the polls, and this is from the One News poll, which has just come out, showing that National has taken a greater lead. Labor has dropped below that 30%, which is a really important psychological blow there. ACT is up, Greens are slightly up, New Zealand First is just under the 5%, Te Pāti Māori 3%, and then you'll see Freedom NZ on 1 and Top on 1. Now, as always, I wanted to see whether the media was calling it correctly, so I went and dug into the more detailed data, especially just around the minor parties, and if you work from the bottom there, you'll see Democracy NZ on, so far right, Democracy NZ on 0, New Zeal, the new party, on 0.2, New Conservatives on 0.3, the Opportunities Party and Legalised Cannabis Party both on 0.6, and Freedoms NZ on 0.7. You'll notice that in the One News poll they just say 1% for those ones, so they round them up. So panel, let's go quickly around, and I'll start with you, Christine, because I haven't heard from you for 3 weeks. I just want to hear your voice. What do you think of the polls? Oops, we'll turn your microphone. Sorry, right. Christine, we'll turn your microphone on. Start again.
You know that I've been saying for some time there's going to be a landslide, and unless National or ACT really blot their copybook in the next few weeks, I honestly believe, I think Labor will drop down to about 22, 24. I don't think there's any way back.
Okay. Ala?
Unsurprising at this stage, but also noted really low in terms of the main party voters. Both seem to be under 35%, unless that's my pregnancy brain. So I wonder if, there's a whole lot of, Christine said it all. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks. But we might be swinging right come October 14th.
Yeah, I think so. Sue, what do you think?
Yeah, the interesting point there was that 12% are still undecided. That's quite a large percentage, and that the 30% of National, that translates 37%, that translates to 48 seats in Parliament. So that affects people like that have dropped down in the list. So someone like Simon O'Connor, unless he wins his seat, he would be out. So it's not surprising that trend is definitely, Christine was right, the minor parties seem to be dropping as well.
Yeah, okay, and you'll see Sue referred to the 0.12. You'll see that down the bottom right there, don't know or refuse to say 12%. So maybe that's still up for grabs, or they just don't want to tell pollsters where they stand. Michael, what do you think?
Oh, Bob, look, there's an old saying in political studies that oppositions don't win elections, the government loses them. And, the euphoria on election night last time, where Labor had an outright majority in an MMP situation, was obviously unsustainable. It's been all downhill from there, and the recent problems just confirm what other people have been saying here. I mean, the right bloc is going to win, and win handsomely, I think, unless they do a Don Brash in 2005, like the exclusive brethren scandal with the leaflets. I mean, that was an election for National to lose, and they lost it. So, look, it's not a done deal, but I think these polls are pretty indicative of what we already know has been happening, for sure.
Okay, and Bruce, just finally, do you think this is National doing well and getting rewarded, or Labor doing badly and getting punished?
Well, of the parties, the Labor, National, Greens, and ACT, Labor's the only one that's gone down. The other three have gone up. So the trick is in the trends, and we're just watching the trends go. And I think if this trend continues, Labor's going to go down more, and they're going to lose. And as Michael said, governments lose, and Labor looks like it's in the business of losing.
Okay, next topic. New Zealand First wants a referendum held in this year's election. They're not going to get it, of course, but they want a 4-year parliamentary term. They say the current 3-year term is too short. It's expensive holding elections, and therefore we should extend it to 4. But he does say referendum because politicians don't decide. The people need to decide. So let's put it to the people. I'll start with you, Sue. 4 years or 3 years?
Definitely 4 years. It seems to be where the natural cycle falls. You've got enough to implement your policy, whether it's good or bad. You've got a natural place to sort of have that cycle. But we still have the problem of rushed laws under MMP and just how effective select committees are. And we need to use, if we're going to go to 4 years, use referenda more, and make that binding with a higher percentage of pass rate. So I think that's it's a natural place to fall. So
okay, binding referendum. There's a nice little issue. Ala, what do you think? Yeah, where would you go, Ala? 3, 4, maybe even 5 years?
No, 5's too long. I'm probably similar to Sue. I think 4 is subject to that there are certain protections or safeguards put in place that would obviously balance effective government, but also government accountability as well. I think that's always the argument against the 4-year term, is if we don't have like an upper house or certain legislative powers currently in place that would, curb that any restrain power. So I think 4 for me, but subject to ABC being also in place.
Okay. Michael? 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, look, I think I agree with the others. I think 4 years is a good is preferable to 3 years. But the problem is, of course, if we have a poor government, we've got the pain for a year longer. Yep. So it swings and roundabouts. But a referendum sounds good rather than politicians. But a binding referendum, that's quite a logistical thing to oversee and manage, but it'd be interesting. I actually think it should be the people that decide that rather than politicians. Yeah,
and I think what Winston is saying is a binding referendum by the people. So you were alluding more to the fact that if we're going to allow 4 years, we also need a check and balance and allow binding referendums on issues if the people can muster up the energy from
more referenda.
Yeah. Okay. Christine, 3, 4 or 5?
Look, I like the idea of 4, but imagine another year of what's going on now, total destruction. I mean, we're teetering on the edge of the cliff and so many things, and we've fallen over it. Another year of this, and we are ruined beyond being able to recover. So it frightens me. It's all very well to say 4 years when things are going well. It's one hell of a time to wait when things are going badly. And Sue's idea about binding referendum is a really good one, part of the Conservatives' policy that was when I worked for them. But I'll tell you what, politicians hate it. They don't want anything to do with binding referendum. They don't want you controlling things. They want themselves to control it. Binding referendum, except in exceptional circumstances, won't happen. We're dreaming.
They ignore all the referendums. The only one they've taken heed of is their own one, and that was about John Key's one on, what was it on?
The flag.
The flag, that's right. Yeah. So when they bring it in, when it's a citizens binding referendum by politicians, they
not
heed
interested.
the results. Bruce, just finally, 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Well, it would seem that I'm the odd man out tonight. I say definitely 3 and certainly not 4.
Yeah, same. No, you're not the odd man. I'm odd as well.
Because we don't have an upper house. We have MMP system, which gives the government more power anyway. Binding referendums are a two-edged sword. I don't like them very much. And the name of the game is restraint. And in a culture that's gradually becoming less restraint, the state is becoming less restraint, the more time they get, the worse they'll get. So I would stick with the 3 years.
Okay, and the other issue is the government has introduced a bill to Parliament last week to lower the voting age for local elections. And it seemed very sneaky that they did it last week. The media didn't seem to want to talk about it. And some people wonder whether it's just sort of foot in the door so that they can lower the general election voting age as well. It was done by Kieran McAnulty, who's also the Minister of Racing. And Bruce actually sent me through a very funny cartoon that was just released today, going away from Kieran McAnulty's office, Minister of Racing, question mark. Yep, racing to get 16-year-olds voting in the coming election. So nice one, Bruce. Thanks for sending that through. So let's find out. Do you want the voting age dropped to 16? Let's start with the youngest. Ala?
Heck no. I'm sure we can all reflect back to when we were 16. And in terms of our thinking faculties, I wouldn't say I wasn't the most competent. Not that I was a deviant 16-year-old, but yeah, I think the arguments for it just don't have that. They're not good enough. I'm only saying that also being in the education sector, and I look at what our 15 and 16-year-olds are putting out, or in terms of literacy, numeracy, and they're not even meeting international standards. How are they able to vote wisely and competently as well? So I think this raises issues around competency, and I just don't think generally all 16-year-olds are there. And there's a big difference between a 16 and an 18-year-old. I would say that's a universal conclusion. So no for me.
Okay. Bruce, yay or nay?
So no for me too. Goodness me, when I was 16, I only got my shoes matching twice a week. I didn't know what to do. So I don't think they should. 16 is far too young. And by the way, it's connected to the idea of 4 years, 3 years too, because it extends the power of the state, or because 16-year-olds' votes will tend to be left. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why it's favoured by the left. Yeah. And if I had my will, it would go up to 21.
Okay, there we go. Sue, what do you reckon?
Yeah, that was a weaselly, sneaky move by my MP. He's the MP for the Wairarapa. I just say, why 16? I mean, the argument then you can say, why not 15 and why not 14? But I want to pick up Vivek Ramaswamy. He's the candidate for the Republicans in America, and he actually wants to lift it to 25 so that you can respect civic duty. And the only reason he'd have 18-year-olds vote is if they are doing national service. So if you're an emergency responder, or you serve in civic duty, or you're in the military, or you can pass a civic exam. So you value voting itself. So we're all about lowering everything. Why not, why not put out the idea, well, how about we lift it? And he wants 25. And I think that's an interesting opposing point.
Okay, Michael, we're about the same age. At 16, we're in fifth form, thinking about School C and trying to mature ourselves. I think we should have had the vote as well.
Oh, absolutely not, Bob. Look, you know me. Look, I've spoken with you before and written about it, but, we can't have it both ways. We can't lower the voting age and then have liberals and leftists trying to raise the age of criminal culpability. You can't have it both ways. No, I don't agree with this. I think, having also worked in education a lot over many years, young people are struggling to read generally without understanding constitutional issues. And I think the point Bruce made is also a good one, that left-leaning parties want this because the cult of youth is very much high on the leftist agenda. So that's why they want it. Yeah, but they're also honouring a previous agreement, I think, in this particular case, that they said they would look at it. Yeah. And time's running out, so maybe that's a factor as well. But definitely not, Bob, no.
Okay. Finally, Christine, what do you think?
ludicrous. It's a left-wing process where they know in the future it's not going to just be local government, it's going to extend, and that of course supports the Greens and Labor very strongly. 16-year-olds, unless they've been well conditioned by their family, are not going to vote for anybody else, and they're certainly going to be inclined to vote for the left bloc. So yeah, it's a plan to support them in the future.
Okay, and part of the pressure has come because the Supreme Court said that by not allowing 16-year-olds to vote, it was a breach of the Bill of Rights. But then again, why didn't they say 10 years old or 7 years old? The Supreme Court also deregistered Family First, so they don't have too much brains, I'd say. But that's just my personal opinion. Right, next topic. Family First has released its election voting guide, and I hope everybody has gone to the site. Let me just take you on a quick tour of it. There we are. You can see, I don't know who that guy is, but if you go down, you see the voting record of all the individual MPs. Let's click on one, shall we? Brooke Van Velden. And so you click on her, and there we are. You get a rating of her family-friendly voting. Green means a good vote, black means a bad vote, and it goes through a whole lot of laws that have been voted on: abortion, euthanasia, conversion therapy, birth certificates. Then you can look at the party leaders who have all been sent a survey, and they had to answer it. Let's pick on one, shall we? James Shaw, and he has a rating of, what's that, 15%. That's 15% too high. And then let's go to the issues, and you can see the individual issues there, and there's some background reading on all of that. There's a bit about, we don't need to see that. And then, of course, you can go and download the 16-page pamphlet, and here's the best bit. You can order printed copies, and my ex-PA, Denise, and her husband, Lee, have already received more than 200 orders. They are packing. They've got 25,000 pamphlets in their garage with another 25 to be delivered. So they've got a lot of work to do. Now, I have sent the guide to the panellists in advance, and they have had a read through it, and they're going to give us a quick review of what they learnt from it, what was a bit of an eye-opener and what wasn't an eye-opener. We actually worked on it together to make sure that it had some semblance of accuracy. So do you want to review it? You'll probably say that it's just unbelievably good.
That's right. I thought you were going to skip me. I feel like there's a bit of bias here. I've got one here actually. So I think it's a great resource, especially if you're a social conservative Christian as well. You don't see these kinds of resources around anymore, and you've really got to hunt for them. So I thought we did great, Bob. Well done. As surprises, probably more Luxon. I thought he was more socially conservative than what he voted. So that was a big eye-opener for me.
Okay.
Other than that, everyone else just aligned with what I'd already assumed.
Okay, that was an excellent review. Let's let's move on to Bruce. You had a read. What do you think?
Oh, well, I thought it was excellent. The high tech, being an old fellow, takes me a while to catch all the high tech, sliding little things across and all that, working out what a cross means, etc. But once I'd done that, I thought it was excellent. And it also gave me an insight that I wouldn't otherwise have had. And didn't have to plough through a whole lot of stuff to get to it. So, and I doubt very much, this is only an intuition, one may well be wrong, but I doubt if in any other Western country you'll find anything as exhaustive as this.
I have seen, to be honest, some done by the family policy groups in the States, probably not as detailed. I've seen some Australian ones as well, the UK. So they are sort of done. But
I thought this was better than anything I'd seen, but...
Yeah, I think the fact that we've gone to leaders and asked for their opinion on much more than what they've voted for in a lot of social issues is probably one of its main strengths. And the fact that most of them did respond, including the minor parties.
Well, it's probably easier in a country like New Zealand where it's small and the politicians are more accessible than in a country like the United States.
Although Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins both ignored our requests, so we just had to go on while we'd heard them say. Michael, what do you think?
Oh, Bruce, look, I agree with the others. Well done. Look, well done to you guys. Put this together. It's visually attractive. It's comprehensive. It's user-friendly. It's well-researched, and it's incredibly helpful So it's just a class act, really. Thank you very much for putting it together, and I think it's a resource for people who are interested in socially conservative issues. You know, National has in social conservatism, but it's really lost those. And you've heard me say before, Bob, I think there are some in National, both present in the present National Caucus and also previously, who are really trying to out-woke the left. They are no different. And even the equivocation of Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon is extremely disappointing. And there are some really good MPs, social conservative MPs in National, but by and large, they're trying to, they just mirror the left, really. And but look, this is an excellent resource and highly commended, and thank you very much.
Okay, Christine?
Oh, you're not going to be happy with me, Bobby. There is nobody in New Zealand, I believe, that admires someone more than I admire you, Bob, and Family First. I think you're a fantastic organisation and I support you every step of the way. We need to face reality here. Those politicians don't make an ounce of difference to anything that we care about. We have to fight for what we believe in, and I say it over and over again, we're pathetic. We sit back and we want all these good things. We know what's right, but when it comes to the crunch, everybody's afraid to put themselves on the front line and fight for it. They don't care about a pamphlet like this. They don't care about what you say to them because they're appealing to the middle ground voters, and they don't care either because people like us never stand up. What you do and your organisation does. But we need to look much, much wider than that to put the kind of pressure on them that's going to make a difference. This is not going to do it. You look at all the politicians that have agreed with the kind of way we think. Have they ever made any difference to this? No, they have not. The rot has continued and it gets deeper day by day. So I love it, but I don't think it's going to make an ounce of difference to any outcomes. And well done, and congratulations to both of you. We need to do much more than this, and we need to do it en masse, and we need to do it regularly.
Okay, does that count as a 90-second rant?
Well, I didn't have one to begin with.
No, actually, just looking at the comments here, Chris says, Christine, clap, 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 clap. Elliot says, amen, Christine Rankin. Hex Token, which is an interesting name, says, spot on. And this one cracks me up. Peter Parr said, the lady in green is so right. There we go.
My word.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
There's a movement out there. We just have to press the button and we'll all do it.
Okay, anyway, go to valueyourvote.nz, download it and start ordering it. You need to get in money. You're just under 8 weeks to go. Now, just back to a new issue. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters again has announced a number of policies around transgender issues, including laws requiring new organisations, including schools, to have clearly demarcated unisex and single-sex bathrooms. They also want to deal with the whole sporting issue as well. Wants a law about biological males not competing in women's sports. So, what does Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins and the other party leaders think? Well, Christopher Luxon says it's a non-issue and you must be on another planet if you're concerned about this issue. Well, I'm going to ask the panellists if they're concerned, but just very quickly, let's just check the media coverage of this.
Winston Peters causing quite a stink today over toilets.
I'll make it very clear. Somebody who's got a male appendage should not be in a woman's bathroom or a girl's bathroom.
New Zealand First reigniting the controversial debate on women's spaces.
I'm telling you, you're on a different planet if you want to have a conversation about bathrooms and make that an election issue.
We're the only ones grounded in this campaign, can't you see?
It's not something that's being raised with me at the moment. I don't think it's front of mind for most New Zealanders.
A lot of people do want to enter the debate. A lot of people are saying, thank heavens, someone is making a stand for women.
New Zealand First is proposing a law ensuring any new public bathroom has clearly demarcated unisex and single-sex facilities, and that current toilets aren't used by anyone of the opposite sex.
Women and young girls should be safe and feel safe when they go to a public bathroom. In some parts of the country, you've got men going in there and using the same bathroom. And a lot of people are seriously concerned, and rightfully so.
It's cheap and nasty, and it's at the expense of trans people.
This is politics that does not belong in this century, and perhaps neither does this politician.
New Zealand First would also withhold public funding from sporting bodies which don't have exclusive female categories.
Now, you want to defend cheats, go right ahead, but my party does not.
Well, there we go. And believe it or not, you actually had David Seymour agreeing with Winston.
Yes, in every way possible you will be accommodated. But you can't tell people that black is white and white is black. You can't tell people that they're not allowed to ask the question. And there may be some facilities and some sports where actually people want to make a law, and it's allowed under the Human Rights Act, that actually you can't participate or you can't use this changing room or whatever if your birth sex is the opposite of that it's reserved for. I think those are the kinds of debates and changes that New Zealand's going to need on that issue.
Well, we're certainly having the debate. So to the panel, is the transgender issue a key election issue? Is Winston onto a winner? I've got to come to you, Christine, first on this one, because you might have to say something nice about Winston.
I think he is right. And I thought that David
can I just record that? That was the 21st of August at 8:41 p.m. Christine Rankin said Winston was right.
He is right, and there are a lot of people who are afraid of it. But when you get dismissed, as you were by the current Prime Minister and the leader of National, it's pretty hard to speak up and speak out. I think David Seymour actually described it perfectly in his part. So I agree with both of them.
Okay. Ala, what do you think?
I don't think it's a main election issue, but it's becoming an issue because this government's been sinister in the way that it's passing bills and policies that continue to push the gender ideology or trans ideology. For example, in my case, as a pregnant female, that language is slowly being weeded out, and it's now pregnant persons. We're moving into chest feeding. It's happening already, and it's happening under our noses. So although it's not front and centre, there is just some sinister ways of it being pushed through policies and laws that affect us, whether we like it or not. So it's going to start with bathrooms. Sports is next. I think New Zealand can learn from a lot of what's happening abroad, in the West anyways, and it is going to come to our shores, and it's a slippery slope if we don't curb it, nip it in the butt now. And if it's not now, it's never. So I like Winnie. I like Uncle Winnie. He's a bit deceitful, but he's saying a lot of commonsensical things that a lot of Kiwis aren't courageous enough to say, or when we've got a lot of gutless politicians that are just teetering on the edges, pandering to a minority that don't even make a significant part of our population. So, yeah, go Winnie.
Okay, Michael, do you think that Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins are not being asked these questions? Because the fact of the matter is I've played some video clips where he's specifically being asked about the whole gender issue.
Yeah, well, Sean Plunkett asked him, of course, and he was befuddled and said he needed more time to consider that question. I mean, it was just quite pathetic, really. Look, this is actually pretty important because what it means to be a human being as a male and female and all the implications of that for social order is really important. And yeah, okay, Winston might be politicking and people accuse him of all sorts of things, but going back to the point you were making, Christine, he's a courageous guy. He comes out and says it. Okay, he's tapping into the electorate. There is an ageing demographic that love him. But, you know, it's refreshing. Whatever you think of the guy, it's refreshing for somebody to come out and say, look, this is how it is. And he's really only articulating what probably really 95+% of the electorate thinks. But the point you were making are too gutless and lacking in courage to actually say it. He says it. And what's more, Bob, I think he's coming from a genuine heart. Yeah, sure, he's politicking. We're in the midst of an election campaign. But this is the guy's heart. He is a social conservative. And there's a place for him in government because a genuine conservative has a very important function in putting the brakes on some of the madness. Now, he's prepared to do that. And also Seymour, I totally agree with what you said, Christine. He comes out. He's the master of the soundbite, really, for me. He can just come out and capture something he was a little more long-winded there in his explanation, but he's absolutely onto it. And, the electorate will respond if indeed they're courageous enough to own up and agree.
Okay, and actually, just before I come to you, Bruce, just for the final comment, just these ones from Mihi, who says, "Come on, panel, be real. We don't need unisex toilets, dangerous for our females." I think, Mihi, when they say unisex toilets, that is self-contained toilets for one person only. You see that in a lot of public places, and I think partly that's because whenever I've gone to a concert or something, the boys' toilets operates very quickly and there's always a queue outside the ladies'. Is that true? That's a fact, isn't it? So I think unisex toilets is self-contained, but you're right, toilets for only boys and toilets for only girls still is the model that we've always gone for centuries. And Philippa says, Chris Luxon gaslighting like Chris Hipkins. There must be something about being the leader of major parties. Bruce, do you think this is an election issue or it's just one of those beltway ones?
Well, I think it's an important issue. Whether it will be a real election issue is one thing, but the focus is not toilets, although it's an important issue. The focus is what it means to be a human being. What do we understand, and what do we understand preserving those things in our culture that is important? Now, is it important to remember that there are certain fundamental truths that should guide us? And there are men and there are. And traditionally, we've attended to that in a particular way. Why should we change that now in order to placate a very small minority of ideologues? It sounds astonishing and that's being imposed on us from the position of where the ideologues have managed to intimidate. And getting back to what Christine was talking about and how we were so easily intimidated and not fronting up, I think we have a language game going on here. We're being seduced by the language that is helping us to think in a particular kind of way. And we've got to react against that kind of language and take over the lingua franca of our time and point out the conservativeness of truth. And unless we do that without being intimidated, and it's what I said I learned, I suppose, if we're going to be clobbered by the politics of identity, which is what this is doing, and Christopher Luxon, who said that if you're interested in this, you're on another planet, indicates he doesn't understand what he's talking about. Because the politics of identity is anti-history, it's irrational, it's unscientific, and it's a godless bully. And we're being bullied into doing this. And we mustn't allow ourselves to be intimidated, if I may. Sorry about repeating myself, but there you are.
There we are. You've obviously been reading a book on this topic, have you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I do sometimes. Then from time to time, one reads a book.
All right, team, we're doing great. Next topic. A number of politicians, I think this is quite an important discussion, actually. They're calling for action to safely protect candidates and MPs on the campaign trail in the lead up to the election. And the police are expecting an increased chance of disruption and threats. Now, the only real incident that I could find evidence of is when Green Party co-leader James Shaw was assaulted quite seriously by a member of the public in broad daylight in Wellington about 4 years ago. And the media also say that Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson was knocked to the ground by a motorbike before the Posey Parker rally. Interestingly, no one has been arrested for that. In fact, I've got some video footage of Marama after she had been allegedly violently knocked to the ground by an alleged motorbike.
Hannah here from Counterspin, former Green Party member.
Oh, it's a woman. Trans women are women. Tell Māori was never so boring as binary.
Yeah, well, there we are. So obviously showing the effect of being knocked to the ground seriously. Anyway, you can believe that if you want to. What the media don't seem to mention is Don Brash, who was assaulted with mud thrown at his face at Waitangi back in, 2005? National MP Stephen Joyce had objects thrown at him, which I won't name, but they weren't that pleasant. And John Key was assaulted also at Waitangi back in 2015.
Mr. Hongi with coalition partner Peter Sharples was hijacked by a shove to his shoulder.
You're going to go in there, mate? Are you going to go in there?
As the grip of one protester was peeled from the Prime Minister, another man grabbed him from behind.
Stand still.
Okay, so that's from 2015. One of my favourites, team, is this one from 2009. It's actually John Boscawen from the ACT Party, who's a personal friend. He had a lamington thrown at him while he was speaking at a student debate by someone at Unitec in Auckland. Is that where you went, Ala? Unitec? And I actually, the funny thing was that he just kept talking.
Lamington.
I know, waste of a lamington, exactly. Lamingtons will be pretty dangerous around me. I actually think it's the billboards around the community who are feeling most vulnerable at the moment from vandalisms and attack. Now, the media, just before I come to you panellists to say, is this a real concern? The media at the weekend, don't know if you saw, they were reporting that Labour leader Chris Hipkins had been mobbed and heckled by a group of Freedoms NZ supporters in Otara, South Auckland on Saturday morning. Here's a little bit of the footage.
Why are you selling us up, Mr. Hipkins, on the back row? No more Labour pens. You cannot move. Labour pens.
Okay, so there's Freedom NZ getting right in their face, going, no more Labour pains, chanting. Everybody seems to be smiling and getting along okay. There didn't seem to be any aggro as such. They just sort of bombed their protest. And I'd like to ask you panellists whether you think that's a suitable tactic to use. But just before I come to you, here's another protest from a political meeting. Have a watch of this. Okay, that looks pretty rough, doesn't it? Anybody know where that was from, panellists? Ala, you can't say because I already told you. Yeah, it had to be Dunedin, Otago University. That was in 2015. It was an anti-trans Pacific Partnership, a TPP protesters who were jostling and basically pushing and shoving National Party supporters who were simply entering a fundraising event. Now, team, the reason I show you sort of some historical images is, are the politicians right to be concerned about their safety in this election campaign season, or is the media beating this up a little bit like the Posey Parker rally and creating tension where there's not actually tension there? So I'll go to the Peacemaker Sue and ask, because I know you've campaigned at times, do you think that there's a concern around this area for people campaigning in this election cycle?
There's definitely a push from the media, especially the disinformation project and that narrative from media working together. And it just it marginalises the issue. It marginalises and silences voices that want to play in the exchange of ideas. And really, they take a position of arrogance, and so that becomes frustrating. And so you don't have those right forums. I mean, politicians are humans, they live in the public eye. I mean, we can treat them as public property, but I think it is definitely something that is part of the media and the disinformation project working together, and politicians, because it works in their favour, especially those on the left, working together to create an escalation of fear, whereas we should be sitting down. We've lost the art of that conversation and the ability to disagree and to give counterpoints. And I think it's the counterpoints that seem to be suppressed at the moment.
Yeah. Christine, you've done a lot of campaigning, you've done a lot of public meetings, and you've been involved in some controversial things. Do you think there's more angst and anger out in the community, and is it a concern?
I think generally there's more angst in the community. Whether that will translate to anything happening during the campaign, I really don't know. I do think it's been whipped up by the media, and I think they'd only be sympathetic if it happened to certain people. They'd probably be quite pleased if it happened to those they disagree with. I hate the heckling and the drowning out of anyone's voice, and politics is about listening to people and disagreeing or agreeing, and I just don't think it's necessary. It's a horrible thing to experience, and you have a right, whoever you stand for, to make your point. And I don't like that. I think it's bullying and it's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, did you get much of it when you were campaigning back in, 2011 or 14?
The Conservatives, no, not really. I think that, once we were actually out there and people were meeting Colin and we were attending big meetings, they were so surprised at how brilliant he was, because he actually was brilliant. And they were quite fascinated by that. And we didn't get anything like you might have thought we would get from the reaction from some people. No, it wasn't bad then at all.
Okay, I'm actually just interested in this comment that came through from Charmaine, who said, who just refers to poor Julian and his gatherings. Now, that's Julian Batchelor, I think, who's been going around talking about the co-governance issue, and there's, been quite a bit of violence outside those. I mean, police are turning up every time to those meetings. Whether you agree or disagree with them, there's certainly been some angst outside of those. So, maybe they're right, but maybe they're pointing the finger in the wrong direction. Bruce, what do you think? Are you seeing more sort of violent protest out there than back in the old days? I mean, you would have been on the rugby pitch at Hamilton for the Holt Horatius Tours, wouldn't you? Was that you in the middle with the helmet?
I was there, but I'm not sure how meaningful that fits into what's happening now. I think there might be a slight increase in risk for politicians, maybe. I'm not sure. But I'd like to ask, if so, then why? If there is an increase in violence, what's driving it? And why don't the media examine that? And I think they are beating it up, without a doubt. They are overreacting. And at the same time, we also have a lowering of tolerance. Violence has now become a kind of language exercise. And so what we once upon a time thought was quite legitimate now has become violent. And so that must be a factor that leads into it as well. But I would like to know, next time the media talk about it, give me some kind of explanation of why they think so. I would like that kind of, and I haven't heard it yet.
Well, I think they are giving the answer, Bruce. And every time they talk about it, they say that it all stems from one thing, and that is the parliamentary protest in February, because they want to paint that as negatively as possible. That was, that's really where the disinformation, and of course it's the trad mums who are braiding their...
So that begs the question, what was the cause of that violence? I mean, it could have been stopped by politicians speaking to the crowd initially, and they wouldn't have had any violence. So it's not obvious that crowds are becoming more violent, I don't think.
Okay. Michael, what do you think? Do you think they're... I just have to tell you, team, that it's hilarious. I'm getting this constant scroll of comments going down on my screen. And half of them are party political broadcasts telling who we should be voting for. It's actually quite funny, and I've got to take my hat off to the passion of all these people who are watching and trying to get us to vote for their party. Hey, good on you. That's fine. Ken's having fun sitting in the other office responding to some of them. That's his job, and he deserves a pay rise. Michael, we came to you. Do you think it's getting more violent?
Oh, look, Bob, I think it has. But I can remember the Springbok protests back in '81, and they were pretty violent. In fact, some commentators have said we haven't had that sort of civil unrest up to that point until since the 1951 waterfront strike. So there's always a seething discontent in the electorate, and if you press certain buttons, it can come to the fore. I think it has become more commonplace in our times. And there's a truculence based on distrust. Now, in the last week or two, Labor's done a flip-flop on the GST with fruit and veggies. And, the media will play clips of, 6 months ago, Grant was saying this, and now he's saying something else. And, that sort of distrust and it's not just Grant, of course, it's all political parties and politicians who just undermine our trust. And, as a voter, you only have one vote every 3 years. And in between times, you've got to suck it up. And when they behave, as they do, often with incredible arrogance and flip-flop, and they're playing with our money, millions and millions of dollars, you can see why people get upset. I think that clip you showed of Chris Hipkins being hounded, I don't think that's right to have a megaphone in the guy's ear. I think Christine's point's right. Whatever the issue, whoever the people, they're allowed to have their say. That's the heart of democracy. And I mean, the Posey Parker things was absolutely appallingly covered by our media. Day after day or night after night, they were saying anti-trans activist. It's the language thing that we've talked about earlier in the program. They are whipping it up into a frenzy, and they're totally irresponsible, our mainstream media. So there's a whole lot of variables going on, Bob. Is it worse than previously? If you look through history, there's always been, real issues that have surfaced and boiled over, but arguably they are worse. But we've got the social media factor too, which is so instant and can whip up a crowd in ways that was never possible in the past.
Yeah, and I think I actually agreed with David Seymour. He just said, look, you take precautions, you're just wary and you sort of expect the worst and hope for the best. When we run our conferences, we have a security detail. We have a person who just sits and protects me from Ronji coming up trying to steal my lunch, things like that. So, just basic precautions. Ala, what do you reckon? Do you think there's more angst out there?
Yeah, I think everyone said it. I quite liked the scenes at Otara, to be honest. It could have been worse. I think welcome to South Auckland. People say how it is. People show their disdain, and there's obviously this is symptomatic of a bigger issue, which is what Michael alluded to in terms of just the public not trusting politicians across the board. So maybe I'm a bit counter, but I think it's a nice reminder to politicians that they're not exempt and they don't just sit in ivory towers when they come out to real communities, real people. They're going to get likes or dislikes. And I thought it was a nice reminder to all those politicians. I saw a few local MPs there that I don't see them often out in the markets, and we're out in the markets quite a bit every weekend. So that was a nice reminder to them that they have voters to answer for. So, and that's just one of the perks of living in a democratic society. So, yeah, I'm not for the violence, but definitely for politicians being made known who they answer to, and that is the public.
Yeah. Okay. And just finally, I actually found this. Oh, go on, Christine.
I was just going to say, I just noticed a little comment in the comments that you just can't miss. It said, if you can't decide whether you're fee, fi, fo or fum, how can you decide who to vote for? Oh, I'm sorry, I just had to raise it because I think you missed it and it's very good. Sorry, Bob, I'll behave next week.
I just wanted to show you, I found some old footage of some protests at Waitangi, and this was one of the clips that actually showed a protest against the Queen.
Protest is often involved at Waitangi itself.
You know what this is about, brother!
A T-shirt thrown at the Queen, mud hurled at...
Oh, well, there we go. It was a T-shirt thrown. I suppose that's not too bad. So my kids throw T-shirts at me at the beach all the time, say, cover up, Dad. So that's fine. Okay, that's all we got time for, team. It is... Ronji is already ringing saying when are we going to end? Hopefully we'll have him back in a week or two. Anyway, Ala, you look after yourself because hopefully this isn't the last time we see you before the big arrival. But, we never know. We might see you in a couple of weeks. Team, thank you. Michael, Bruce, Sue, Christine, Ala, it's been a great night. Lots of feedback. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for I don't know who to vote for now because everybody's told me which party I should vote for. So I'm really confused. Don't forget to go to valueyourvote.nz. That's it for tonight. We will see you next week at 8 o'clock for Straight Talk. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.